regulations. You can also go to, what's the other ones?
Restraining order.
Thank you.
And contempt of court.
Thank you. And felony crimes. And they will hold up to a year or pre-prison term. So it can be longer than a year in Lynn County Jail. However, it's mainly, they're just being held there until they transfer over to the prison. So state prisons, felony crimes, and these are long-term sentences. These are your lifers, to put it general. So one thing, and just to back up, the municipal jail only handles, it's only Lebanon municipal misdemeanor crimes. That's the only thing that the Lebanon jail, and they were sentenced, and that's the only way that they get to our jail. Any questions on that? So just some historical Lebanon jail operations. So in 2009 is when it was built with the anticipation of being fully staffed with 6 corrections officers. So back in 2009, that's when we were talking. It still needs to be staffed, but we never got there just due to funding. So we're still talking about the same thing. From 2009 to 2023, we made it happen. So it was ran solely by patrol officers. And as we dive into that, just a real quick overview, it really, what that did is it limited patrol functions. So every hour on the hour, an officer would come off the road, go into the jail, and do jail checks for the adults in custody. So decrease the officer safety aspect of it, especially when we were working two-man teams. One officer would be in the jail, one officer would be out and patrolling a city of 20,000 people. So you can imagine some of the hairy calls that were coming in and having to deal with those with just one officer. And it also, it ups the liability for the individuals who were sentenced in our jail. So they were pretty much left alone. I mean, they were under video surveillance, but they're pretty much left alone for that hour. So a lot of things can happen in that time frame. And then if it's just video watching, something happens, they're calling for an officer to come from wherever they're coming to get in there to provide any kind of assistance or medical. And we all know COVID hit. And so the courts actually closed altogether in March of 2020. They reopened in August of 2020, which caused a huge backlog of cases and individuals who were needed to be sentenced. As far as the jail goes, we temporarily closed. We temporarily closed, and we weren't closed as long. We reopened in 2020. And then we were open all the way up until December 31st of 2022. And if you guys recall, I came to you guys and the decision was made just based on the staffing issues that we were having and the liability concerns as far as in trying to meet the CIS operating requirements. We were unable to meet those requirements, as well as what ORS was saying as far as the hourly checks.
Yeah, and just when we reopened the jail, it still wasn't functioning at full capacity. We were limited in the adults in custody coming in, and we only had one officer at the time working back there. So I think that's important to note for later when we look at some of the statistics.
Yeah, we even tried to do the Monday through Friday, if you guys remember me talking to you guys about that. And we would, it worked, but it wasn't working as it should. So kind of looking at some past stats, we took over the past 5 years, some statistical data just from the police side of it, as well as the courts. And when you're seeing calls of service increase 11%, so what I'm talking primarily about here is misdemeanor crimes. And So this is solely based on what the jail, what we'd be using it for. The cases that were charged have increased over the past 5 years by 30%. So we are out there charging people. It's 30%, and then you get into which that's kind of the main number right there is where you want to pay attention to is the warrants issues increased by 52%. So it's just a cycle right now. We're going out, we're conducting business, we're trying to hold people accountable for their actions, but it's just not being met. Again, 52% increase in warrants that are being issued by the courts is a pretty huge number.
Yeah, and the cases charged is what went through the city attorney's office. So I guess that's just, wanted to make that note that that's what the charged means on that. It wasn't our arrests. Those would be even higher. More on that one?
Questions on that one? So this one's a big one. Failed to appear court appearances. So again, we're going out and we're trying to hold people accountable, but basically giving them a piece of paper to come to court. So, and basically, we kind of went back as far as we could in 2022. We see a 68% of the individuals who we cited to go to court just simply didn't go. 2023, we're at 72%, so we're starting to see a rise. 2024, 69%. And in currently, right, we're only 6 months into it, we're at 68% of the individuals who we're out there addressing and issues just simply aren't coming to court.
Right. They don't feel like they have any accountability. And to them, it's a citation, and it's just a, cyclical process of we give them a citation, they go out there, they don't show up for court, it gets scheduled, or they get, another warrant, goes through the courts, goes through the city attorney, goes through the courts, comes through the police department, and we have to put it through LEDs, and it's just, there's many hands for one warrant for one person. And yeah, 68% for 2025. I was actually shocked to see that.
A lot of staff time being spent entering the same information on the same person time and time again. So,
Chief, is that something that having the jail would help? Because these appearances very shortly after the arrest?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, I think it just speaks, right? It just speaks in volumes of right now, you are giving someone just a piece of paper and you're telling them, yeah, you need to come to court, and you're trying to hold this person accountable, but they're like, well, okay, what happens if I don't go to court? I get another piece of paper. There's no, I guess if you want to call it, there's no teeth to it. As much as we try, but it's just, and it's, you guys heard from the judge and what his frustrations are in regards to that. There's only so much that we can do. So.
I've asked it before, and I'm pretty sure this is algebra like always. There's no way to really calculate the cost of that revolving door and all those people who have to touch that, is there?
No, it's right. If you were to evaluate the cost of one individual, we could take that one individual and go through. I could provide a cost for you. I just haven't done that.
But these numbers don't surprise me really that much. They're shocking to the public. They don't surprise me that much. Why would they show up? Well, and there is no teeth to it, and that's why it's so important to me.
Right.
These percentages, what's like the ballpark for the total? Like, are we talking 100 people, 300 people?
No, we're talking,
1,000?
so I think if I remember the correct numbers, it was like 11,000 some odd people were cited into the court for, at least we'll use 2024 for an example. And out of 11,000 some odd people that were cited into court, 69% of that didn't show up.
Got it. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes
Okay.
sense.
So, and this was something that, as the jail was closing and things were progressing in this direction. It's something that we were trying to see what kind of numbers we were looking at moving forward and what could we do and what could be done.
And I mean, did people fail to appear when we had the court open, or I mean the court open, the jail open? Absolutely. But there was still an accountability piece.
Yeah, I guess the difference is when the jail was open, if someone failed to appear, we'd get notified, we'd enter that into the system as a warrant, and we'd go pick them up and put them in our jail until they saw the judge again. Whereas as right now, someone fails to appear, we go out, contact them, give them a piece of paper and tell them to come back.
Chief, of all these people and criminals and everything, what percentage of them are the repeat of the repeat? I mean, the question I guess I'm asking is there like 1 out of 100 of them that are they just keep going in and out the door?
The same customer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Repeat offender, literally.
We see a very high percentage of the same offender over and over and over and over. As far as a percentage goes, I don't know if I could really come up with a percentage, but I say it's a very high number of the same individuals that we're dealing with over and over and over again. Again, it's just there's no accountability right now. There's no teeth to it. I think, some of the major ones you want to look at are trespassing, right? So we deal with trespassing day in, day out, and most of these individuals are the ones with mental health issues, and you don't have a tool to guide them. So we're dealing with them every day.
What do you suggest we do with them? Stiffer penalties, or
Well, again,
after so many times ship them off to Lynn County? Or
I think we just need if I can, the resources. When the jail is open, we have a multitude of resources that we can reach out to, and then getting those individuals the help that they need, whatever that may be.
I should probably know this. What's the capacity of our jail? 12? Thank you.
Yeah. Just some jail sentences. These are inmates. Inmates. These are adults in custody. Sorry, that have been sentenced through our courts. You can see 2018 and 19 were our good years. We were at full staffing levels, and I had 1.5 officers dedicated to the jail. So in that year, we had over 700, or in 2018, 714. At a minimum, they would serve 1 day. At a maximum, it was 58 days that year. With total days of everyone served was 1,874. So if you go through the years, 18, 19 were open, 2020 we were temporarily closed and then kind of reopened. 2021 is when we're starting to have staffing issues. So you can just see the decline as it goes through the years. And then 2023 we have zero stats because again we were closed. So the reason I put this up there, the reason why we did this is just to show when it is open and functioning, it is utilized every day. So on average, I believe we had 2 to 4 adults in custody. Any questions on that one?
Are you over capacity right now? I apologize.
No, our jail's closed, but
This is held just to council at this time. It's a work session. There's no public comments. No problem. Please continue, Chief.
I think that's all I had on this, unless you guys had questions on it.
Before we carry, I'd like to clarify, you want the jail open, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, I know that's really not the purpose of today, but I at least wanted to show you guys kind of an overview of when it is open versus when it's not, as much as I
No,
could.
I get it. I just want to make sure we're on the same team here. You guys would use that as a tool. It'd be a great tool. We just have to figure a way to do it,
Correct.
whatever the challenges.
Yeah, bottom line is, yeah. Yep. Yep. So just to throw out some, what, you might be asking, what are misdemeanor crimes? So this is what our jail would hold and does hold is all your assault, non-domestic violence, harassment, disorderly conduct, trespass, criminal mischief, theft, and driving offenses is your DUI, your habitual offenders, and reckless driving. So kind of going into what are the impacts if it's fully staffed Lebanon Municipal Jail. So I think first or more, it provides local accountability for misdemeanor level offenses. Again, we're talking about community safety. So it's holding individuals accountable. Allows for short-term detention within the community where they committed the offense. Supports timely processing of arrests and court appearances. So it's not, we don't have a backlog and we're not repeating over and over and over again. Allows for officers to be back in patrol in a more timely manner. Again, if the jail is staffed as it should be, then we don't have officers coming off the road to deal with that. We have individuals already there working. Enhances public safety with immediate holding options. Provides referral access for individuals needing the medical and the much needed mental health and the A&D services was alcohol and drugs. And it reinforces citizen safety and livability. So this municipal jails in Oregon in 2023, there were 7 that were in operation. And as of today, there's only 3. So we have Springfield, Reedsport, and Florence. So we're one of the ones that, there's 4 that closed. And then the reason why they're closing is just failing to meet operating demands and the legal obligations that it takes. Our insurance, they came and did an assessment right before we closed, and these are the things they came back with as the top risk categories, staffing being the number 1, medical number 2, suicide prevention number 3. And again, it's the ORA standards, hourly checks, license, the medical policy review. If we don't have medical staff there, we don't have policy, it makes it impossible to meet those standards. And also, again, with staffing levels as they were and the busyness of our agency, it was making it virtually impossible for officers to come off the road to do those hourly checks, which is mandated by state law.
Yeah, and so these CIS assessments, these are one of the main reasons why the other 4 jails have closed.
Chief, are these 8-hour or 12-hour shifts for jailers?
They would be probably 12-hour shifts is what we're looking at.
So how many employees would it take?
6. Yep. So operating demands, legal obligations. So we got to meet these 2 requirements. We got to meet ORS, the staffing care standards, and as well as the CIS standards from our own insurance. And rather than me list out the pages and pages and pages of these things, I just made, actually, Lieutenant Powell, I made copies of these and handed them out to you guys so you guys can actually see for yourselves what those standards and obligations are. And there'll be a test after.
I was like, Chief, for the medical, is it just going to be a nurse that needs to be available, or do they also need to be on site?
They need to be on site 2 days a week, and they need to be overseen by a doctor or physician. And so And you'll see kind of a later slide, we have that pretty much worked out, or not worked out, but it's just, again, it just comes back down to funding. So.
Any questions on the handout? We can move forward on the next slide. Okay.
So I wanted just to provide you some of this information too, is the way that we were operating the jail. Obviously, we were out of compliance with CIS, and just over the last 20 years, we take what claims were filed. Big one there is the medical claims, and they pay out of 21.4 million. Suicide claims, 5.17 million. And the top causes, again, is the staffing, medical, and then the suicide prevention. So basically, if you don't have these things in place, you don't have the correct staffing, you don't have the correct medical, or then the suicide prevention, chances are very high. I'm sure that the CIS would cover us, but as soon as we had a claim, they would probably drop us, and then we would be on the hook. The city would be on the hook for any kind of claim that came through. So pretty big liability there. So here's the breakdown for funding, and keep in mind some of his estimates. We talked 2 years ago, it was $750,000 for personnel cost. 2 years past, 825 approximate. For a licensed healthcare provider, which includes nurses working under a physician license, right around 75,000. Insurance, CIS is 30,000 a year, and again, that can either go up or down depending on. And I'll kind of let Lieutenant Padwa kind of explain that a little bit, if you wouldn't mind.
So it would come down to an assessment that they would do based on what we have and just the conditions of our facility. And it could go up and down 5% based on what they see and how the assessment plays out. So could increase or it could decrease, but chances are, well, we don't know at this point. But if everything was in place, I'm pretty confident that it wouldn't increase.
So then you have the operational costs. So you need, transport vehicles, clothing, meals, maintenance, that type of thing. Right around 317,200 for the grand total.
Sorry, you wanted to
skip past that.
See that, huh?
back one more. Oh,
So there's a total. So right around 1.2. And so, it's substantiated or sustainable. So any questions so far from me?
I have a question on the nurse. If the state has the requirement for the 2 days a week for a nurse, and is that a set 8 hours a day, 2 days a week?
Correct.
And one of those 8-hour days, there might be no one in the jail, so she's just sitting there. And another day, there might be 4 people in the jail, but the days in between, they might need a nurse. That just seems like an ambiguous, ridiculous requirement.
I agree.
That cost about $75,000 and doesn't really get you anything.
No, I agree. I mean, the way that we were, Oh, go ahead.
So I was going to say, the way we're running things right now in a lot of the other municipal jails, or not us right now, but so they would come in, the ASC would come in, we'd ask them a series of medical questions at that point, and then there would be a score, and then we would notify the nurse, or the nurse will work under the doctor's license. So they would come in if we needed them to come in. This is just so they can evaluate them, because after, I think it's 3 or 4 days, they would have to be seen, be medically evaluated at that point to say like, hey, this person's okay to be in, kind of like just a quick checkup in the hospital. that they're healthy enough to be in there. And if not, then other services would be provided. And then at that time, they'll figure out, mental health, alcohol and drug components, whatever else. And they won't be sitting there for the 8 hours if we don't need them. We would call, they would come in, see if we needed anything. They would look over everything that we have, including any medications to make sure none are going to give them any side effects, and continually evaluate them with the doctor as needed. So the other portion of that is because they're caring for people that are in a jail, they have to have a special insurance. So that would be included in there as well, because a lot of carriers won't just do it on their own, at least from what I'm being told by our provider that I've been talking to.
So is the $75,000, is that a contract or is that an estimate based on how many hours we think we'd be needing them to? Are they only getting paid when they're there because we called them in for an evaluation, or do they have a contract that just pays a set amount?
Yeah, no, this would be a contract for the doctor to oversee everything, go over our medical policies, medication stuff, and also have the nurses there 2 days a week and be on call 24/7. So
I see.
And how we were doing it prior to we'd pay the nurses when they would come work. So it worked out that way, but that wasn't what is under the CIS guidelines.
Ryan, if a person has to go to the hospital, do they have to be accompanied by a police officer all the time?
if they're in custody, yes. Sometimes we do a medical release thing. 4-hour medical release is what they call it, or to pick up some of the medication. At that point, they would leave and then come back. It worked, but it was scary because you never know what they came across when they were out on the field trip. So they could introduce something into the jail at that point too, and it would be even worse. So, but yes, if they're in custody, they would be accompanied by an officer at that point.
Which would be a corrections officer if it were staffed.
Officer.
Yeah. Well, it was an officer before. I mean, we don't have corrections officers, so it was an officer, again, being pulled away from patrol side of things.
To me, that $75,000, I don't want to spend, that seems pretty reasonable for that kind of care, for that kind of commitment. Rather be less, but that seems like it could be a bigger number.
I agree.
Yeah,
Chief?
take it away.
Jail funding options. So this is the fun part of it, right? So let me caveat it with we're doing a whole series of work sessions this summer and gearing up for goal setting in October, so that we can make the best decisions moving forward with the resources we have and with what projects and funding that we've got available and what we're going to need to have in order to do some of these projects. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So the first and probably the best option is going to be an operations levy. So what that entails is going out to the voters, seeing if they're interested in funding this at 1.2, call it $1.3 million. Takes approximately 6 to 10 months to go through that levy process by the time you get it on a ballot and go through that. We're thinking somewhere around $60,000 in consultant costs. And you ask what that's for polling. I would highly recommend you poll this before we put it out and make sure for sure that the citizens this is actually what they want. Messaging and then just general guidance as you go through an operations levy. Another item to note with a levy, the general obligation bond for both the library and the Justice Center come off in 2027, June of 2027. So the last time people see that on their tax statements is going to be November of 2026. That's probably your prime time to go after that because you're trading, one thing for another instead of asking for additional revenue from your taxpayers. But that's just a staff recommendation. Other thing you could do here, and the last two are not as palatable, but we looked at everything, would be to increase your city services fee. That is one option that you do have available. The increase on that, I think, to get to the dollar value that you need right now would be about $12 to $14 a month on the single-family home. Of course, that's more for your larger commercial and industrial operations and apartments, or not apartments, but larger meter users. So that's one option. That is an option. Not a great option, but it is an option. And then the last option, which I'm not sure how we would do this, we've looked a little bit at this internally, but reduction to existing city service. So you would reduce existing city services by the tune of 1.2 million. And what that looks like, that's pretty daunting and not very palatable as well. So those are your options, I believe, in getting the jail functional. I think Frank and his team has alluded to it doesn't work for the patrol team to run the jail, nor will CIS agree to that. So it's going to have to come down to something along those lines, and we continue to look for options, but really this is what you're left with, at the end of the day. Any questions on how we got to that and what those numbers, anything there look like?
You know what a great mathematician I am. How much, as the cost we're already paying for the jail to be empty comes off, how much difference does that make? Is there a way to calculate that? I mean, how much is a citizen paying right now on their taxes for that jail to be open and closed versus what they'd pay for it to be open?
Yeah, that's, Brandon, I don't know, maybe you can run a number for us?
Laptop in hand.
To piggyback on that, like the current rate per thousand for the bond, and then what it would look, what I'm asking already. Yeah, I saw the nod. Okay, thank you.
Got the numbers ready. Okay, so right now, we're not paying much in the way of any expenses on the empty jail. We have some small operating expenses over there, which I think amounts to about $9,000 a year, which is a blip as far as, what residents are paying in their current taxes. It's going to that $9,000. So it's essentially zero in that regard. The current levy for the bond runs about $1.15 per thousand. And if you wanted to replicate that, or if you wanted to do, 1,250,000, you're looking at a levy rate of about 78 cents per thousand. So this would be a little bit smaller compared to what we're paying for that, or what we're pulling in for the debt service on these two buildings.
And since you're here, and I know I've beaten this horse, and I'm sure it's dead. There's to sell this, and I don't want to say sell it, to present this to the citizens, there has to be some way that we can quantify how much it costs us to not have the jail open, to go through that revolving door. And like I said, I know that's not an A plus B kind of a calculation, but it's got to be costing us.
And I think what you could do, taking some of the data that the police department and our court pulled together for this presentation, I think what you could do is try to assign some hourly rates based on staffing. As far as the warrants, how much extra time does it take for the additional warrants to run out of the municipal court staff, and then, processing the additional warrants each year, what does that run? So you could get somewhere in that ballpark. You could get close. That would take a little bit of time.
Well, in my simple mind, the deterioration of the quality of life caused by the people who just keep going out there is a number that we can't do
quantify
that math.
Yeah.
But it's affecting the quality of everybody's life. It's happened to me. I've dealt with these guys. They've come on my property and trespassed, and there's nothing you can do about it, and I get it. That guy could come back tomorrow, he'd get another ticket, and he'd go and trespass again. He can come in my backyard anytime he wants to. That's not a safe way for our citizens to live, and I think it's something we need to address.
I think you could quantify the staff time it takes to handle the extra that we are doing based on the statistics that you've been shown. We could get to that point. The part you could not quantify is the general impact to the community, right? The specific, loss that somebody may incur, whether it's a property theft or, an automobile, a break into a car. Words are a struggle apparently. Anyways, but those are the things you could not necessarily quantify, right? Those are extremely difficult to quantify, but you could at least get to what it costs the city for the potential of not having that jail.
And mathematically, right now, if we came out the other end of the bond that's there and opened the jail, we'd officially be paying a little less.
Yes, as far as the property
30
tax rates
cents
are
or
concerned, you'd be a little bit less, yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a few comments here. I don't think that we can put a price on our safety and security, bottom line. But I'm thinking, what are the voters going to say and what are they going to ask? And these are the questions I think that they will ask. We had this jail operating 10 years ago. And did our budget for the police department go down when the jail was closed? Or did the budget for the police department stay the same? Has it increased over those years that or the last couple of years that we haven't had a jail? So has that money always been there and all of a sudden it's not there? And I think these are questions that the voters are going to ask, and we should have a response for them.
Yeah, our budget hasn't increased or decreased based upon the jail. We need to operate it at a level that is the requirements by the state as well as our own insurance. It's requiring that extra. So the way that we were operating it prior to is we were making it work to the point where CIS and even our own laws we weren't abiding by. So so insurance is saying these are the requirements that you have to meet, and we were failing to meet those requirements, puts the city at a huge liability, as well as the safety and security of the individuals who we had housed.
So if we do things right and we abide by all the regulations that the state's imposed on us as far as that goes, we would not be able to operate that jail in any way at all on the previous budgets that we've had.
Correct. You'd need again that number that was shown to you. That's the number that you need to be sustainable.
And I think that these are
it's an increase
the voters are going to ask.
Yeah, and part of this is you've got inflationary costs over the last since it's been open, but like Frank alluded to, they were running the jail with their patrol staff, right? And so what that does, regardless of whether CIS says you can or can't do that, that creates risk for our patrol teams, right? So that's the other aspect of this. There never was dedicated corrections officers for the jail when that opened. They just made it work, and now we're up against the wall where CIS says, no, you can't do it that way, and Oregon revised statutes says the same thing.
So if we're going to do this right, it's going to take a levy or fees of some kind to accomplish the goal of getting the jail open.
Correct.
Well, and there's no sense not doing it right, because the way we did it before just kept people off the street, kept the officers off the street helping people. So that's not a trade-off we're willing to make, is it? I don't think. Even if we could do that, I'm glad we can't.
It's not sustainable.
I'd like to add something. If we don't do it right, what we're doing is increasing our exposure to lawsuits. We have to do it correctly. We have to do it by the ORS and what the requirements for running a jail is. To do it any other way would be foolish, and it would just set us up for a big downfall. The other thing I wanted to ask was a question. If we had the money today, right this second, how long before the jail is actually open?
You got to hire staff, right? You got to train them, and so I'd estimate probably about a year.
Yeah, so almost 2 years if we did it. Say we did an operational levy, because you cited 10 months.
6 to 10 months
Okay.
if you're going through that process, yeah.
Okay, so we'd go with the, err on the side of safety there so I'd say 10 months. So that's almost 2 years before it would be open. So when's the other ones come off? 27?
Yeah, the last time everybody will see it on their tax statement will be November of '26. And it fully comes off in, I think, June 30, 27, Brendan, after that tax cycle.
Not long ago, that seemed like a long ways off, but it's really not.
Yeah, it's pretty close. I mean,
Timing for that part's pretty good.
right.
Say one thing that does concern me is so there were 7 5 years ago, and now there are only 3. And looking at, I mean, the trend is obviously not having municipal jails, clearly. But even just the ORS was last amended by legislature in 2024. So, if this is something we do, it's 1.2 and change isn't probably the number, understanding that the state will probably have more rules that go along with running municipal jails, especially if there are only 3 or 4, in our case, operational in the state. We will face increased scrutiny for that, and that's just something that if we do take this to the voters, we need to keep in mind. So that's my 2 cents for that.
Well, I would like to also say your funding options here are have a lot to be desired. Honestly, we've talked about this before on multiple occasions. I think that really the only option for us is operational levy, in my opinion. That's my 2 cents on that. I don't think the people have an appetite for increased service fees, and I do not see any place that we can really do reductions of city services short of closing this building and the senior center and
That still wouldn't get you
yeah,
there.
it's still not enough. You're absolutely right.
Well, it's kind of counterproductive to what we're trying to do.
Exactly.
Quality of life we're losing,
Yeah.
it just doesn't make sense.
But it would also,
trade-off.
if we did a levy, it would also, we'd be able to we'd actually see what the appetite of the city is for having a jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that.
We might be surprised as all get out. It passes at, 80%. We'd be like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I wish you could find another option.
We didn't put collect pop cans on here, but that's one thing that we could probably look at. Yeah, there's just not a lot of options to increase revenue, as you've seen over the past year and a half. There's very little option out there.
Another question that popped in my head while you guys were presenting your brief was on the medical side. So when a person gets processed into the jail, do they go through a medical examination right then for a baseline? Or do they just?
I'll let you answer that. Good. Look like you were reaching, man. Go for it.
Like Jeopardy.
No, we just have a bunch of medical questions, which are updated after, the doctor, our medical doctor will look at them at that point to see what's current. And then the doctor will come in. If they have any obvious signs of anything, then we'll get that evaluation done right away. So.
All right.
Any other questions on my elaborate funding schemes?
You put a lot of work in.
Way to think inside the box, Ron.
Yeah. Well, trust me, we've been outside the box, and
It was a joke.
Yeah, I know it wasn't. So can you go to the last slide? So the last slide is something that we'll continue to update as we're going through these work sessions. And really what this is ties into our strategic action plan. This is project, we called it the project, but you'll see different variations of it, but it's one of the goals. It kind of gives you an idea of what those capital costs are, what the risks are, and the capacity. Because as we move through the rest of these work sessions, you're going to see that there's some of the same people that are going to have to be involved with these larger projects, and those are time consuming. And that's where we're looking for this body to make some, during goal setting, to give us some direction and some priorities as we go through. So we'll keep this slide and we'll keep adding to it as we go through these work sections this summer. So with that, that's all I have with it, unless you guys have more questions for the experts.
Thank you so much for the information. And for putting up with me harping on it.
Well, before we adjourn, I would like to ask Officer Jackson if he had anything to say. He sat up there in the hot chair
good.
the whole time and hasn't said a word.
For support and to answer any questions you have. So.
Okay. All right. Wanted to give you the opportunity. If there's no other questions or comments.
I really should have made them do the whole thing, really. They're sitting over there. I'm the spectator over here, so.
Well, if there's no other questions or comments, and that concludes your brief, that I'm adjourning this meeting. So work session is adjourned.
27 with a quadri jet on it.
That's what I'm thinking.
I thought, you know,
These feel so far away.
it's a great cast mileage.
No, the mic. It seems like.
I like the sound of that.
Oh, yeah.
Well, at first I was sitting down, the chair was all the way down, and I felt like I was like hiding behind a thing, and I was like, well, I can't at this point during the meeting go like this.
Going
So I
like
waited.
crazy.
It felt
It's
odd.
crazy after I got rid of. There's still a few loose ends with her I need to take care of, but once it's over.
Call the the meeting to order. Let's please rise for a flag salute.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty, thank you. City Recorder, please call roll.
Mayor Giacola,
Present.
Council President Steinhebel,
Here.
Councilor Conti,
Here.
Councilor Mann,
Here.
Councilor Salvage,
Here.
Councilor McLean,
Here.
and Councilor Workman.
Move into consent calendar following items. Ooh, excuse me. I was out of practice from not being at the last one. So follow items are considered routine and be acted by one motion. There will not be separate discussions on these items unless a councilor so requests. In that case, the item will be removed from the consent calendar and considered separately. Agenda, Lebanon City Council Agenda, July 9th, 2025. Board meetings from the Senior and Disabled Service Advisory Committee, 2025-0115, and council meeting from 2025-0611, City Council work session and regular meeting minutes, and updating authorized signers of the city bank accounts. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion's been made to approve. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Going to move into a presentation tonight. Chief, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. At this particular point in time, I'd like to call up Officer Zachary McKinney. My administrative staff. It's right here, sir. So just for record, Officer McKinney had no idea that this was coming to him. Yeah, I kind of thought you'd figure it out when your parents showed up, but anyway. So we're here today to recognize Officer McKinney for his actions. On June 10th, 2025, Lebanon Police Dispatch received an urgent call regarding a 32-year-old male who was unconscious and not breathing. Officer McKinney, who was in the immediate area, responded without delay. Upon arrival, Officer McKinney found a male subject unresponsive and purple in color, indicating severe oxygen deprivation. He directed medics to his exact location and without hesitation immediately began life-saving measures. After checking for a pulse and breathing and finding none, Officer McKinney started chest compressions. He performed 2 full rounds of CPR before medics arrived. At this moment, when medics arrived, the subject began to breathe on his own. Emergency medical personnel then took over care for and transported the individual to the hospital, where he ultimately made a full recovery. Throughout the incident, Officer McKinney demonstrated composure, decisive action, and unwavering commitment to preserving life. His quick response and immediate medical intervention were critical and directly contributed to saving the life of this man. In recognition of these heroic efforts, Officer Zach McKinney is hereby awarded the Life-Saving Medal for his action that significantly and directly contributed to the saving this man's life. Congratulations. Job well done.
Oh, wait a second. I never let anybody get away. Did you want to say a few words? Okay, with that being said, I see a lot of officers in here. So, Chief, who's on the street right now?
Good time to rob a
It's
bank.
covered. It's covered.
Job well done. Thank you. We'll move on to public comments. Citizens may address the council by filling out a testimony comment card prior to speaking, hand it to the city recorder. Each citizen is provided up to 5 minutes to provide comment to the council. Council may take an additional 2 minutes to ask clarifying questions. The city recorder will accept and distribute written comments at speaker's request. We have 2 tonight. First up, was he gonna do the 5-minute thing, or do I need to use? Okay. First up tonight is Jeff Holland. Would you like to come up and speak, sir?
Yes.
Please.
It feels.
As I said earlier, were you putting the? Oh, there we go. You have 5 minutes. You ready?
Yes.
Okay.
As in light of that award, I feel it would be inappropriate for me to toot my own horn, so to speak, in a public forum. I just don't want to steal that guy's thunder, you know? But nonetheless, I just wanted to declare my love for self-help books and put something positive in the world. You know, with AI bloat, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get political, but everything's political nowadays. The point being that just care for one another and care for yourself because you're human too. All right, that's pretty much all I wanted to say in public speaking, anyways. Can't be too careful. Anxiety. I have autism. This is just another way I'm helping myself, trying new things, like learning experiences. I just recently got into DD services. I'm sorry. Can I ask a question to the audience? Is this too much? Should I stop now? Or have I gone too far?
Well, I would like to say this, that most people don't have the bravery to get up and speak.
Thank you. I really appreciate that compliment.
And in the last meeting, I'll just clarify that what happened there. That meeting was strictly just for the council, and that's why I had to say something to you. So
I apologize.
you know,
I
you don't
did
need to
not mean to
apologize.
interrupt.
Yeah, sometimes people I open my mouth at wrong times all the time. Trust me, but the only difference, they usually put my story in the paper or something. So,
I see.
did you have any more comments? You have 2:58.
Wish I had time to drink some water. I left my backpack over there. I can't exactly leave the mic. But nonetheless, you know, silly human issues. Take care of yourself. In a world gone crazy, you're the only one you can really rely on. I'm not saying that in a sociopathic way. I'm saying that as a humanitarian way. You can't care for others if you yourself are broken. People tend to forget that. And savior syndrome is dangerous. Don't kill yourself to save others. It's silly. But I don't want to sound insensitive either. So I think it'll be best if I end this conversation now. As awkward as it may be.
Alrighty. Well, I appreciate you coming up and speaking. The motivational words that you had is inspires people. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Marilyn Belcher.
Good evening. I am Marilyn Belcher, and I'm part of Ward 1. Several months ago, I addressed this council with concerns about an alert system in the event of a flash fire sweeping through our town. We had just returned from Los Angeles following the horrific fires that devastated Pacific Palisades and the surrounding areas. I am pleased to say that our chief of police has taken this concern seriously. As I have followed this most recent tragedy in Texas and read reports from the National Weather Service, there have been questions yet unanswered about the effectiveness of the alert systems there in place. Were there cell phone alerts, as there were in LA? Were phones turned off in the middle of the night? Were local authorities attentive to the weather warnings? Camp Mystic had a disaster plan in place and what campers needed to do in an emergency. That plan was even approved by the state just a few days prior to that flooding. One very interesting detail was that some of the Texas communities had large bullhorn type of emergency alert systems. Systems on tall poles with effective speakers to sound an alarm. Other Texas communities declined to make such investments. Just this morning, we watched on television one of those test alerts that are frequently aired. Well, not everybody has their television on. We have before us an avenue of opportunity. The last thing we want is to be unprepared and have to watch our city officials answer tough questions to the press. I'd like to close with some positive information to share. Brooke Bingaman, Lebanon High School class of 1991, who was inducted into our High School Hall of Fame for her service with the National Weather Service in the Biden White House as a meteorologist, especially during the hurricane season of 2023, where she served in the Situation Room. She was relieved of her duties by the current administration, but she has now been returned to her service. So the National Service works heroically around the clock, and we should be grateful for their commitment. It is my hope that continued attention be dedicated to this community concern for an efficient emergency alert system. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Was there any questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Moving to the next thing is public hearing, consideration of appeal of a planning commission decision on code interpretation CI-24-01. This is now open at 6:12. The community development director present her report.
I think you need to turn it over to the city attorney, maybe? No? Okay. Going to present my report.
Did you need to say anything there, Trey?
I don't think so, but I got called out, so I wanted to get my picture up there.
Okay.
You look great. Just making sure. Okay, well, I will start my report then. So good evening. Before you tonight is an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision regarding a code interpretation to determine whether or not recreational trails are to be permissible in the low-density residential zone, or the RL zone.
In December, the city received a request for a code interpretation. This was prompted by a proposed trail along the Albany Canal north of River Park, located in the county. If annexed into the city, a portion of the trail would fall within the RL zone. The city adopted a trails master plan and permits trails in the RL zone. Additionally, the comprehensive plan includes multiple goals and policies that support trail development. These policies emphasize alignment with natural features like creeks and riverbanks and along the Albany Canal, and the integration of park uses with linear greenways and a focus of recreational and park uses rather than a focus on zoning. The plan also prioritizes connectivity for pedestrians and bicycles within the natural environment. The Trails Master Plan is identified as an addendum to the Parks Master Plan, as stated on page 4 of the Trails Master Plan, which reinforces that the trail system is intended to be a function of the city's park system. Based on this, and given that the comprehensive plan supports trails without tying them specifically to zoning, along with the fact that there's a municipal code definition for city parks, which includes trails in it, staff interpreted that trails are considered to be part of the park system. City Council has already authorized funding for trails, for a trail identified in the Trail Master Plan that is located within the RL zone once the area is annexed into the city. And therefore, staff also concluded that trails were intended to be permitted citywide in accordance with the Trails Master Plan, including within the RL zone. The Planning Commission reviewed and agreed with this interpretation. The applicant disagrees with staff interpretation. They argue that the development code explicitly references recreational trails as a land use, and the Oregon Revised Statute prohibits interpretation that conflicts with the code's expressed language. The applicant also contends that the interpretation exceeds the authority allowed within section 16.25.020A, which requires interpretations to be narrow and in the scope and focused on specific text. However, section 16.25.020C of the Development Code states that no code interpretation may conflict with the comprehensive plan, the Development Code, the Municipal Code, or adopted plans such as the Trails Master Plan or any other standard. Staff determined that categorizing public trails identified in the Trails Master Plan as recreational trails under the Development Code would result in the prohibition of trails in at least 2 zones where trails are planned to be developed in accordance with the Trails Master Plan and along natural features such as trails, creeks, or along the canal. This would contradict the council's intent to align trails with the natural features and the guidance of the comprehensive plan and the Trails Master Plan. As such, staff determined that the appropriate land use classification for trails is other public uses such as parks and recreational facilities, open space, and pedestrian amenities. This is a valid classification as trails are pedestrian amenities and part of the park system as established in the Trails Master Plan. Code interpretations are intended to be a temporary solution until formal code amendments can be adopted. Staff does agree with the applicant that the code does contain ambiguities, and the appropriate course of action is to initiate a code amendment to clarify the treatment of recreational trails and, frankly, the code interpretation process itself. In the interim, the code interpretation process serves as the stopgap to provide the clarity for the code. To resolve the ambiguity and align the development code with the city's intent to permit recreational trails in the RL zone, staff recommends that council approve this interpretation, and staff also recommends initiating a development code update as time and capacity allows. Until that update is adopted, the interpretation that recreational trails are permitted in the RL zone should remain in effect. With that, I will conclude my report and answer any questions.
Any questions for staff, from council?
I have one, Kelly. Is there anywhere that the planning code specifically prohibits trails in RL zoning?
So there is a land use designation called out as recreational trails. And there's also a land use designation for other public uses such as parks, recreational facilities, open space, and pedestrian amenities. So there's that dual area. And so that is where you have the clear intent of council and the comprehensive plan and the master plan that clearly designates that recreational trails are clearly intended in these areas versus where the code was adopted in a different fashion. And so you have our code interpretation with that section of 1625020C that says that our interpretation should not conflict with those adopted master plans and the comprehensive plan. And so our interpretation should appropriately adopt that interpretation and adhere to those master plans.
So it's not, there's no prohibition on it?
So you have recreational trails that are identified, and recreational trails are prohibited in the RL zone if you utilize that land use categorization.
I see.
If you categorize it as such.
Yeah.
Or you categorize it as we have identified as the appropriate land use categorization as the other public uses such as parks, recreational facilities, open space, and pedestrian amenities, because we have identified it as part of the park system, which is the appropriate categorization because trails are part of the park system.
Okay.
That is what we have identified as the most appropriate designation based off of the master plans. It would not be identified as a recreational trail. It would be identified as part of the park system at that point. So that's where the ambiguity unfortunately falls in, and that's why you do have this process for the code interpretation process, where when we do have conflicts, you have this process to designate this is how the city is interpreting the code to say, yeah, there are conflicts. Here's how we're interpreting the code until such time as we can rectify those conflicts.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? All righty, then we'll move into, is there anybody would like to speak in favor of appealing the decision made by the Planning Commission?
Good evening. My name is Laura LaRock. I'm the applicant of the appeal and the initial applicant for the code interpretation. So where to begin? My address is on the record, so that doesn't need to be stated. So I think to put this simply, there's a table listed in the residential section of the development code. The table lists an array of uses on one side. It talks about zones across the top, and you follow the matrix. And inside the matrix, it says what approval type is required, if any. So in this table, it has a clear category that's referenced as a recreational trail. You have your zone. You follow the low-density zone down the column, and it has an N. The N is noted as not permitted. The definition comes directly from the Lebanon Development Code. So when staff refers to this other definition, they look to the parks operational section of the municipal code. So they look outside of the development code, outside the chapter that lists definitions of what the terms are used in the development code to rationalize a determination on this. And that is a far overreach and clearly complicates an issue that is fairly simple when you're looking at a matrix in development code. So the table's included, and I should note before I get too far, I've submitted testimony. One of the documents is dated February 19th. That was simply missed from the agenda packet, so I want to make sure that was included in the record and available for the City Council's consideration. Also missing from the agenda packet was a notice of decision that I was provided. I was not provided the copy of the notice of decision that is in the packet. So those two documents were previously in the record, just drawing a note to those, and then the new testimony that I'm reviewing today. So it should be noted that this development code provision that's in question has been in the development code prior to 2008 when the Trails Strategic Plan was adopted. When the Trails Strategic Plan was adopted as an amendment to the Parks Master Plan, this code provision was not addressed. It's been in existence for over 16 years. I don't think this is an oversight. I think this is intended to be a tool to implement the policies of the comprehensive plan. Staff interpretation is an overreach of a code interpretation. What they're asking you to make today is a policy decision. They're directing or framing this issue as, are trails appropriate? Do they fit? That is not the question of the application. The application is simply to look at the text of the development code with a straight eye to say, is it clear? And is it written as it is intended? And I don't see what's more clear than the table that's provided. They point to comprehensive plans and intent. I'll agree why the comprehensive plan provides goals and policies to promote recreational trails. They are not the implementing tool of those policies. So long-range plans are aspirational. They set goals, we set policies. These are things that we review to make sure that we're reaching towards the goals and policies the city wants to make. However, your development code is actually the implementing tool. It is actually the part that regulates and ensures that the things that are identified in these long-range plans are actually put to ground. They point to some funding that was allocated to say, yeah, City Council has a sports trails. If you review the 2014 City Council meeting minutes and their videos, you'll see that the only proposal that was presented for this allocation of fundings was just saying, yeah, we're going to build a section of Trail 4 in the strategic plan. Staff did not present any zoning maps. They did not present any parcel-specific design information or any analysis. Allocation of funds is purely a policy decision. It's not intended as a land use decision or an approval by any means. So if anything, staff should have been providing some more support so City Council was allocating public fundings appropriate on uses that would be permitted. Staff also points out that, oh, we've done it in the past and trails have been developed, so that also shows some intent. I'll point out that the Mill Race Trail or Mill Run Trail did not go through a land use review, although it was required. Gill's Landing also had trail sections developed without a land use approval. So I think that this may not have come to light just because simply their staff is not reviewing applications for trail development. And then maybe the important thing, why we're here and why it matters. So this was brought to my attention through a trail development proposal. The trail development happened to be in the urban growth boundary, adjacent to the city limits. Seems how it was out of the jurisdiction of the city of Lebanon. It was processed by Lynn County. Lynn County defers to city staff to guidance on their land use decisions when they're in the urban growth boundary. Staff provided this a site, and I think I've listed the email in my packet, that the development code and specifically the table that I'm referencing here was just a clerical oversight. And if everything was to be done, they would just fix it. Not through a code amendment process, which is not permitted. Anytime you change a development code standard, it has to go through a formal legislative process. Why it matters moving forward. So if this code interpretation is improved, it's not a stopgap. It's not saying, you know, we're going to look back to this. It just opens up any future trail improvement project to further appeals and a long review process, because we're going to be looking at the same development code. And by doing interpretation instead of a code amendment, the issue is not going to be corrected. So it opens up potential future projects to be drawn out, not approved, and go through a long process. I'll state that the application was submitted in December, so 210 days have gone by. There was an offer that I have made to city staff to say, let's just stop this, let's withdraw the application, just address what needs to be fixed, let's go through a code amendment process. Just give me a guarantee or a specific date of when this will be started and this application drops. Staff indicated that they obviously have more important items to address and staffing concerns were an issue. However, I'll point out that there was 210 days to address this, and in that time, a code amendment application was processed. So one that would have addressed this issue could have been processed simultaneously or in conjunction with that, would have been an efficient way to address the issue. Staff has also adopted a fee increase for these types of land use applications. And they spent far more staff time and resources reviewing this application than it simply would have taken to go through a code amendment process. And then I think I'll just close to say this is not an attack on trails. This is not coming from a personal belief that I don't think trails are appropriate in a low density zone. This is just simply saying your code is in error. Your staff is interpreting it in a way that is causing some legal conflicts and some appeals. It's making it difficult to do a project. I don't think any private citizen or a nonprofit or you today want to have to sit and go through this every time a trail project comes up. And I'm simply in the matter, if you identify an issue, you fix it. So it's not coming from any sort of personal position on this. I think the city has shown a long-standing support for trail developments. I think a code amendment process would be really well received. I think there would be a lot of support for that. And I'm just not sure why in this length of time and over the 17 plus years the code's been existent, the staff hasn't addressed this themselves. So with that, I'll close my testimony and answer any questions you might have.
Any questions?
I have a question. So I take it is the primary reason for the appeal is because you want the development code changed? I'm just trying to figure out.
Correct.
Okay. So you just want the development code changed, so it's not ambiguous.
I'd like it not to be implied through this code interpretation incorrectly, which is flawed. I'd like it done through a formal code amendment process. And I'd like a guarantee that this is time specific, because staff is unable to provide that, any assurances, and it hasn't been done in a considerable amount of time.
And as far as the code interpretation, the way the staff is identifying two separate land uses, what's your biggest problem with that picking one over the others as far as the interpretation goes?
As you have a clear, specific language that defines a recreational trail as a use type, that's defined in the development code, that's referenced in a table, and not just the low density table, it's in multiple tables throughout the development code. I'm not sure why you would have to go outside the development, go to a park to creatively define that, oh, it's a recreational area and recreational is found in this other definition in this park section. And man, that seems to fit. So I'm going to pick this one, even though this is clearly defined.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, thank you. Is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition of this appeal?
Well, this is all new, very nice. Rod Sell, board president for Build Lebanon Trails. I live at 925 River Road, 1955, sorry, I said City Hall's address, 1955 River Road, Lebanon. So I think, first of all, I want to thank the mayor and city council and staff for all they do for the community. I know it's a sacrifice. I see it. Thank you all for your time and efforts. First of all, I want to state that Build Lebanon Trails is in full support of the staff's interpretation of this, of the being able to build the trails within residential low density zones. And also, Build Lebanon Trails is in support of Lynn County, who's also seen this presentation or a similar presentation that was disputing the correctness of building a trail in the zone, and have unanimously voted to support the ability for the trail to be built in the residential density zones. So a couple of things. Build Lebanon Trails has been building trails down in the community for 20 years. This is our 20th year celebration. And during that period of time, we built numerous trails in the zone area in question. So obviously, historically, it's been approved, and I think rightfully so, this one should be approved again. So what we've been trying to do for 20 years, we've been trying to tie the community together, but with building multi-use trails. And this one connection, this one last trail, we're calling the Georgia Pacific Mill Race Trail, is making the connection between the south of town and the north of town. So the importance to the community of this one trail is just huge. I mean, all the trails are important, but this one's going to make a huge difference to this part of town that doesn't have any access to the trail system that leads all the way to all the way to Cheetah Lake and through 5 parks to get there. And so the significance is that it's an off-street trail system that goes from one side of our community to the other. I think I had a couple more points I wanted to make. Oh, I did a pretty good job covering those. I just thank you for your past support and know that we're here. Build Lemon Trails is here to not only build the trails, but to maintain the trails. And I think our past history shows that we're doing a lot of good service for the community. And with that, take questions.
No questions? Alrighty, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience? I can look out in the audience and tell there probably isn't, but I'm going to ask just to make sure if there's anybody else that would like to speak in favor or opposition. All righty. With that being said, public hearing is hereby closed at 6:34. All further discussions be limited to council and staff at this time. Trey, did you want to weigh in at all on any of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've looked at this every which way you can, and it's not just that there's an ambiguity. I mean, there's a conflict. And when you have a conflict, it's not unusual when you're working off of various documents. We have a comprehensive plan. We have a master plan that shows obviously the trails going through the areas where the development code might otherwise indicate that they couldn't go. So what is the intent? Well, the intent is, the reason this is a administrative legislative action is because this body is the policymaking body of the city of Lebanon. And to a certain extent, we can't apply one without violating the other. So I think it's kind of as clear as that. And so you look at what the more definite or more specific of the conflicting language is, and obviously the master plan, which basically says this is exactly where we're going to put these, and that master plan was put in at a time when those trails obviously go through areas of single-family housing or low residential housing. And you're saying, okay, would this council have intended to not change the development code to correspond with the Trails Master Plan? And the answer is obviously no. The second point is that the question was asked of Ms. LaRock, who obviously has a deep understanding of planning. But the question is, so what you want is just a code amendment, development code amendment, and she responded yes. And so the question is what's the real practical effect other than forcing the city to spend the time and energy at a time when they, have said it's a priority, but we haven't got to it yet. So there's no practical effect to the decision to postpone this or rule against this code interpretation unless the council had some inkling that they were actually going to go back and change the residential, and we're not going to put trails through residential anymore. And that's obviously not going to be the case. So there's no practical effect as a result of that, because the result's going to be the same one way or the other. And even if there is an appeal, to the extent that that development code update happens during the pendency of the appeal, that appeal is then going to be moot, and there's no reason for it anyways, and it would just get dismissed. So, we're just spending a lot of time, energy, and effort on an issue that isn't necessarily going to make a bit of difference in the long run. So, some of that was legal, some of that was just a practical response to the position of the appellant.
All righty, thank you. Is there any other discussion from council or staff? Feel free to jump in.
Trey, just to be, again, just crystal clear. So you have reviewed this and you also agree with staff's recommendation, is my understanding of if I were to sum it up, is that correct?
100%. We work together on it.
Okay. Thank you.
I agree there's with everyone that there's conflicting statements in the development code, but I think I have to agree with Kelly and Trey that the directive of city council, well, if you go back to planning commission, parks, trees and trails committee, city council over the last 12 years, they've approved all these different trails in RL zones, and they've approved this trail, and they've approved the parks master plan that shows it through these zones. I think because there is that conflict, you have to pick one over the other, and the decision makers, us and the other bodies that are all directed by the public, have made the decision that yes, this is something we want. If the purpose of this is just to change the development code, we all agree that the development code needs to be cleaned up so there's not a conflict. But I don't see any reason to stop moving this forward because of, I mean, like Trey said, it would just delay it, because we are going to approve a development code change that will allow this to happen, and all we're doing is pushing off this trail. So I agree with Trey and Kelly.
Well, I think that everybody likes trails. Everybody wants trails. I think that there shouldn't be a problem with just clarifying how we're going to do it. Either pick one code or the other, or marry them both together and make it one code instead of dancing around from this code to this code. I think transparency and clarification is the way to go.
Well, I don't think anybody's opposed to cleaning up the code. We've been doing it since and before I even was elected. You know, we come across these issues and you clean it up and you do the best you can, but there's stacks and stacks, and you get to them when issues arise. I know that we're going to clean up this process, I would imagine.
Yeah, so we're more than willing to clean up the code and make it a little more usable. I mean, there's other places within the development code that also have, you know, there's conflicts that we'll probably have to look at as well. I think that the key takeaway here is the council back in the day authorized, approved a master plan that include trails as part of the park system, and it went through these zones. They don't have to be exactly in that location, right? But that was the intent of the master plan, was to make connectivity through the city. And so that's what our interpretation was based on. And now, does it conflict in a place with a development code? Yes, but that's the idea behind an interpretation. So, and we have no problem cleaning that up. I can't give a time frame on when we're going to clean that up. I mean, within the next few months, I mean, we could do that. But at this juncture,
I think it's fair to say that we can make a good faith effort that it will be done by the end of the year.
yeah, I think that's fair.
I just have one other question. We're talking about multiple codes and different sources of information and code information. Does one supersede another, or how's that work? Is there a hierarchy of when you go through the codes, or?
When it comes to parks, I don't know. Transportation would probably trump the development code, based on, but you try as best as you can to marry those two together.
So it's the most strict applies.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what Trey was talking about, right? So like in this case, you have a trails master plan that is strictly talking about this specific thing, and alignment of the trail system and where we're going to do it and how we're going to do it and what it's going to look like, right? And so that is the strict conversation of the trail system, right? So that is the strictest interpretation of it. And so when you're looking at that, we would look at that as the strictest application of it.
And in general, the development code is put in place in order to apply and interpret and basically put into effect the overall comprehensive plan and the master plans that are put in place with it. So, obviously we need to clarify the development code in order to effectuate the purpose of the comprehensive plan and the master plan. But it doesn't change the overriding policy vision that is created through the comprehensive plan and the master plan.
All right. And your development code is supposed to implement your policy. And so if your development code is not appropriately implementing your policy, then it needs to be changed.
Alrighty, go ahead.
I think that's all Laura is asking for, is that it be cleaned up.
Yeah.
And in a timely manner. I don't
Yeah.
blame her for asking for that.
No, and what I would also say is that, she asked for a code interpretation and we gave one that was consistent with where we believe that the policy of this council is and previous councils. And at no time have we said we don't agree that the development code needs to be changed. It's just that apparently there's just a timing issue that is more of the complaint.
Alrighty, any other questions or comments? Alrighty. Thanks, Trey. Is there a motion on this issue?
Go ahead.
No, somebody else can do it too. I move to uphold the Planning Commission decision for code interpretation CI 24-01.
Second.
Motion's been made to uphold the code interpretation of CI 24-01. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
The ayes have it. It's upholding the code interpretation. Thank you for everybody that came and spoke. We'll move on to regular session, department reports. City manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, I'm gonna, in keeping with having the department directors give a little spiel on their departments, Angela Soulsby, our Human Resources Director here tonight, and she's going to give you a little update on her department and what it does, and then I'll cover a few things after she's done.
Good afternoon. So mine will be a little bit lighter than the last conversation. So within human resources, of course, we have multiple disciplines. One of them is staffing, so that's more often referred to as recruitment. We've had 28 job requisitions posted in the last fiscal year and nearly 500 applicants for those postings. That's a little bit of an increase from the previous year. So we're up about 3 applications per requisition. I know those are nuances, but they're exciting for HR. We hired 15 new employees. We had 5 promotions. We had 15 separations from employment. And we had 3 retirements. That means full retirement, leaving the city, not just retiring from PERS and working back. And we have a total turnover percentage of 12.7. It's a little higher than we ideally like, but it was a little bit of a tough year. For our classification and compensation, we are still in process, and again, I say we a lot, but me, in the process of updating our job descriptions, and those are to be compliant so that we have physical requirements listed in them. That way, if someone gets injured and they need to go to a physician, they have the physical requirements for the job listed in their job description, and that physician can better tell if they're able to return to work or not. We do a lot of training, so our employees are good sports about that. We had 6 HR-related trainings and 2 IT-related trainings last fiscal year, plus an additional 12 safety-related trainings, so we usually do those on a monthly basis. So overall, for our employees, that was about 2,260 trainings completed by employees, which is about a 94% completed on time, which is impressive considering a lot of our employees are out and about, police department, public works. So they do make the time to get that stuff taken care of. We talk about performance management quite a bit. We have completed 41 performance evaluations over the last fiscal year, which is great. We are still a little behind in that we are about 40 evaluations past due. So we're working on that. Ron is breaking out the whip on that. We completed a successful ODOT drug and alcohol compliance review. So with the assistance of Kendra Oliver at our transit, we went through a really comprehensive review of all of our drug and alcohol processes, procedures, policies, and came out green on the other end. And the last thing I want to just kind of share is that over the last 4.5 years, so in 2020, we implemented an exit interview. It's just an electronic survey for employees to take. Over the period of 4.5 years, we've sent out 72 invites and only 22 completed surveys, so 31%. It's not terrible, but it started to finally give me some data that I could share. And so I'll give you some of the highlights. Overall, we have a 77% are either satisfied or very satisfied with their work-life balance. Over 77%, or overall 77% are either satisfied or very satisfied with their compensation, which is, again, good to hear. Overall, 73% usually or always felt valued while they worked at the city. Basing on individual departments, the culture was described as amazing 14% of the time, rewarding 38% of the time, collaborative 43%, and then there were a couple of not so happy folks. So they are able to select multiple items in there. So some people might have thought it was amazing, rewarding, and collaborative. Overall, the city culture is 59% friendly. So we live up to our motto on that one. And collaborative, 23%, and rewarding was at 18%. So definitely some areas we can work on. The reason for leaving, which I think is something that's obviously a lot of people have an idea. Higher pay was listed at 41%, growth opportunities at 32%, a shorter commute, 27%, and 23% had retired. Overall, 68% of the folks likely or very likely would recommend someone to work at the city. Happy to answer any questions or share any details.
Is 15, is that a high number for turnover in 1 year?
12.7. Generally, you want to keep it at 10% or below. So we're just a smidge over. But again, it was a little bit of a tough year. There were some reductions, and so that affected our turnover.
Of those 15, how many were fired and how many quit?
I could probably get that number for you pretty quickly, but I would say our involuntary terminations are very low. So probably 1 or 2. Most individuals choose to leave for usually another job.
All right, thank you.
I have one for you. You mentioned the thousands of hours of training, and myself being a city employee, not here, different city, I do the same online training. And I've always wondered, is that mandated by law, that training? Like, is that to comply with a certain regulations, or is it just to make us feel better? Because as a city employee who does that, it's a terrible waste of time, and I don't benefit it from it all. And I can probably speak for all the city employees in here that have to do the same training.
Yes, I think most people would agree with you. Some of it is a requirement. So for instance, bloodborne pathogen, PPE, then there's harassment, sexual harassment. So there's a certain majority of it that is required. And a lot of that falls under our safety training. So those one every month.
Yeah.
The fluff, I guess you could say, come from the HR side. So generally those are trainings that have to do with conflict avoidance, how to feel more positive in your work-life balance. And then we've really started to incorporate more IT trainings into that. So there'll be a little less on the fluff HR side, because I know that's where folks tend to be like, but we've started to implement more IT trainings. So cybersecurity and, what emails you should be reading and what ones you shouldn't, those kinds of things. So I think they're going to be a little more technical. Again, not required by law, but certainly reduces our liability.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's good. I just want to be mindful of the employees here, of their time and anything that we can do to reduce the time on a screen, taking a test that you'll forget in 7 minutes.
Yes.
You know, I want to do that.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Angela. I just have a couple of things. One is a reminder, they're actually tied together, that we have a city council meeting on July 23rd, noon. Also a work session. That'll be a wastewater treatment plant work session. And with the wastewater treatment plant, Jason will probably be mad at me for saying this, but we did receive a draft copy of our MPDS permit for review, which has only been since 2004, maybe. We've been waiting on this. So timely. Got held up in a lot of lawsuits. So we're in the process of reviewing that and what changes are coming our way. And then we'll have that. And I think we'll probably even have at least executive summary of the wastewater treatment plant master plan on July 23rd to share with you and go through some of that. With that, I really don't have anything else unless you have questions for me.
All righty, thank you. Is there, we'll just move on to items from council. Is there any items that anybody wants to bring up? All right, we'll move on. Is there anybody from the public or press that would like to come forward and speak? Please.
Good evening, Sarah from Lebanon Local News. Regarding the work session talking about reopening the jail, you guys were leaning toward one possible way to fund that. I know it's not really something that you guys haven't made any decisions or anything, but I have this lingering question. If you guys went for a levy and that didn't pass, is there going to be a backup plan to raise the city service fees? And again, I expect you probably couldn't answer that, but it's just something I wanted to put out there as an unanswered question that I have.
You want, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think we've got to that point yet.
No.
I mean, it would be hard to speculate. I think if your operations levy didn't pass, then you got the word from the community in that. And so to turn around and raise your service fee, the city service fee, I'm not sure that would bode very well.
Okay, thank you.
But again, that's a council decision, not mine.
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the public or press? Alrighty. Next scheduled meetings, council meeting is 2025-07-23, regular meeting and work session at noon, then 2025-08-13, work session and regular meeting at 5. Right after this, we'll clear the room, we'll go into an executive session. And Trey, are you still online?
I am. And actually, I had a question, maybe for Julie. Do I stay on the same Zoom link for the executive session, or do I need to sign on something different?
Yeah, Trey, just hold on and we'll be right with you.
Okay.
Stay there.
Stay on this one. Okay.
All righty. Well, we'll right after I adjourn this meeting, we'll take a 5-minute break and then go right into executive session if people need to use the facilities or just stand up. So this meeting is adjourned at 6:56.